All right, it is a few minutes after 10, so we will get started. Welcome to day 4 of our Arts and Robotics program. We're really glad to have everyone here, and we appreciate everyone's patience as we start the projector, reorganize the space a little bit. We're delighted to have Heather and I give our keynote talk for the program. I'm going to start way back in the beginning. Heather's work in music video production and design won a British MTV Video Music Award. She organized an entire robot film festival before she even graduated from school, and co-authored. And what's really important, I think, she's co-authored some of the most cited papers in this intersection, particularly with respect to the performing arts and robotics, including an ICRA paper. We joke sometimes in this community about breaking into the real proceedings, but we're making some real big steps in this year, trying to get maybe our own special session included in future ICRAs, and Heather has been a pioneer in having her work at ICRA in the formal paper proceedings. Her lab, the collaborative humans and robots interactions, sociability, machine learning, and art, Charisma is the acronym, at OSU has had a central focus on the arts and already produced impressive work, including publications and transactions on HRI and articles on dance and robotics at RSS, and in theater and robotics at IROS. Her influential work spanned over a decade of research in robotics and many verticals in the arts. Performing arts, visual arts, comedy, dance, theater. I can think of no one to better represent the art in robotics, and I'm looking forward to your talk, and we'll do a few questions at the end as well. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Amy. Hey. Hello. I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I have been in the robotics community for a very long time. I started in 2002, so this is, a very meaningful experience. The talk today is about entertainment methods. Oops, I see. Okay, let's see. Okay, thank you. Oh.
Yeah. We're still rearranging. I love it.
The talk is about entertainment methods and social robotics. I have a paper called The Robot Show Must Go On that talks about how important it is for live performance to fluently operate even when there are minor hiccups. So this is a great example. And you can check out some of our work on charismarobotics.com if you're curious. So I'm going to start with an old video from when I was a PhD student, and I had just been maybe 8 months into doing robot comedy.
Am I doing a good job?
Yes.
They love me. They really, really love me.
Oh, don't cry. No, he's so sensitive. Robots don't have emotions, and that makes him very sad sometimes.
Right. We're working on it.
Yeah.
All right. So, another kind of cool thing. So obviously, there's lots of robots that sort packages and that can build awesome craziness and even take care of manufacturing or flying our airplanes and more easily landing. Apparently, I guess when you have those really bumpy landings of your plane, it's probably because the pilot wanted to be like a cowboy and turn the autopilot off. Someone told me that recently. But anyway, so but in addition
that doesn't make me feel safe, Heather.
In addition to the more technical modules people work on, there's also a lot of people thinking about how you can improve make better life with robots, whether it's helping the elderly stay independent for longer, or working with children that had autism. There's different kinds of things. So another one that in especially in America that we might care about is healthcare. So how could we exercise better with robots? And this is hopefully a group exercise.
Oh, stand up.
So you can all stand up.
Put your laptops down and get some exercise. Yeah, there we go. Here we go.
Can you see the robot? Uh-oh.
Oh, well, then sit down.
So watch the person in front of you. Hopefully it will go back.
Am I doing a good job?
Yes.
Wrong one, sorry.
Am I doing a good job?
You really hurt his feelings,
man.
I
know. He needs a lot of reinforcement.
Okay, just give me 1 second.
Not anymore, sweetie. All right. Yeah.
Live demo.
This is one of the interesting factors about working with robots as performers is that while they have infinite patience, we don't. So it can be problematic.
Time to get in shape. Let's start with the arms in 3, 2, 1.
What, you thought he was kidding?
The other one's on.
One more time. Everybody now.
This is a lot of workout for a roboticist.
Nice work. Now for the legs in 3, 2, 1. Do you feel the burn? Ouchie. Doing great. You almost done. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Looking sexy out there.
Wow.
Called you sexy.
Oh,
I didn't leave pause for the laugh. I'm working on that.
okay, you can be seated. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
cool.
you. Thanks for playing along. That's awesome.
Right. All right. So,
All right, okay, so that's enough for kind of an intro, but I just wanted to show you a proof that I've been doing this for a very long time, okay? The intersection of robots and performance and different modalities. So, per Avery's request, I'm gonna start with some concrete lessons that you can use in your work, whether you work on social robotics or any other robot system, as long as there's some kind of human either in the environment or advising that system. So my field is human-robot interaction. It's pretty expansive. And next I'm going to give you some timelines of work. It's not everything, but I'm going to share some photos that aren't in the publications. I'm like the backdrop to making real stuff happen. If we have time, we can also talk a bit about how performance methods might be a good solution to reducing NSF funding in terms of theater performers are really good at using a minimal stage and a low budget to make awesome stuff happen, all right? And your research participants pay you to watch that performance, prospectively speaking, like at the Rialto last night. And they offer many data points at once, prospectively. So that was one of my first, the reasons why I got into robot comedy was actually to test a way in which a learning robot could integrate a audience response into what it is offering it. That was the concept. Okay, so 22 years in and out of academia and industry. Here are some of the affiliations that I've had over time. I worked for the Jet Propulsion after graduating from MIT. I went back there to do a master's. I've also was the first non-French hire at Aldebaran Robotics, which made the Now and Pepper platforms. I helped design the head panels. I studied electrical engineering, mostly really interested in human sensing initially. Later, I got into robot generative expression. Now I kind of do holistic robot systems, even in underwater environments, but again, where the human can offer support to the robot. Like this AI agent architectures are supposed to be going through all industries right now. So perhaps this metaphor of a social agent could also be relevant to some of these rising technologies right now. All right, but what is entertainment? Guys, I looked it up, okay? It has something to do with the enter, and it also has something to do with the tame, okay? So the old French word that this came from was entertainer, which meant to hold someone's attention, initially by conversation. So think about that. It requires at least 2 agents. You can't, I guess you could have internal family systems and an inner conversation with yourself, and we do have an AI counseling project I'm not going to talk about today. So this could apply to, parts therapy as well, I think. But this idea of entertainment is to hold someone's attention for an interval, okay? If you speak Spanish, I guess it comes from the Latin. It's also tener, to have, to hold, okay? Over time, it also involves to encompass things like amusement and enjoyment, like watching a movie, playing cards with friends. So what about social robotics? I said entertainment methods in social robotics. Well, the earliest social robot was Kismet, developed by my first advisor, Cynthia Brazil. So she did this project while she was a grad student at the AI lab at MIT. Here is Kismet. It had drives to play or socialize in some of its instantiations. It also had a lot of expressiveness, like in terms of ears, inspired by not just human, but animal behavior. And I will similarly draw from both animal and human behavior in this talk. But look at the cognitive architecture. It's not just precondition, postcondition, right? Like there's internal drives. So one of my internal drives is often for coffee. Okay, so when I got here for the expo center yesterday, I looked around for the coffee, right? It could also be that if there was a really nice snack, it could be an external factor that's going in from the world into my perception and then attention system that causes motivation. So motivation can come from inside, or it can be cued by the environment. And we also interact with the world as well as our interaction partners. So the original concept for Kismet was that there was a person that was helping the robot, right? That's not usually how we hear robots offered to society right now, but maybe that should change. So why is performance a great way to develop robots in general? Number one, if you need to do a live show, things need to work. And that is freaking hard, okay? Number two, they really care about expression. Remember that holding attention for an interval? So they are the artificial expression experts, and they have expertise that has been developed for more than a millennia, right? We've had performance in all cultures, right? Storytelling is really fundamental. So if you want to make a robot juggler, that involves great controls. It's not just about making a robot smile, right? Or frown, right? So this is Matt Mason. I was taking a manipulation class with him at Carnegie Mellon, and he took one day to teach us how to juggle so we could think about contact forces and dynamic motion, right? You also have to think about hardware that's reliable. This is a very old project. Before I started my PhD, I was part of a community in LA where we would make art installations for like events and eventually commercials. But yeah, so this was a bike-powered blender. I took a flywheel, kind of adapted the motion from a flywheel and exercise bike to a blender. It is really hard to crush ice, but it made good smoothies. And so we brought it to the event, and so that was an art installation where people could sit on the bike. So another thing I'll talk about today is that I don't think robots always have to look like people or animals. They can. Sometimes that makes the bar high. Sometimes having a robot that looks less like something or that is cartoonized, or like the Paro robot dinosaur that we can't directly judge from our own experience, can be helpful. Because if we are judging something like the Sophia robot out there against our own facial expressions, our bar is super high. But if someone made a squirrel robot and it had these really articulated tail communication motions, another squirrel would be like, that is a terrible robot, right? But we're humans. And finally, if theater is not your thing, if this reliability is too much pressure, please take a video, okay? So one of the reasons I founded the Robot Film Festival in 2011, and that then ran to 2019, was that I think that video is just a wonderful way for this international community to share our work. It is the most evocative, and if there's anything with an interaction, it helps, like dance. We can't display work on robot dance without a video. All right, how many of you actually work on social robotics? How many of you have tried or are curious about art intersections with the robot? I mean, I guess you're here, but... Great, okay, so this is all you need to know. I use this diagram over and over with all of my grad students. So this is how you make stuff. You have to figure out what is possible, and you have to figure out what people care about. And this can obviously be a moving target as new technology comes out, right? So what is salience? So this is a term I learned from Cynthia Brazil. It's an attentional mechanism by which organisms can learn and survive. It's how we code what matters, right? So we look more for motion than non-motion. That's helpful for predicting not getting eaten, for example, or seeing our friends that walk into the room. So that would be an example of a salience filter, that our brain pays more attention to motion than non-motion. So I'm going to go over 6 lessons at a high level, and then we'll go through them in a little bit more. All right. Well, if you remember nothing else from this talk, prioritize the nonverbals in your development process. It's not just about speech. I know people are excited about language models right now. Vary your motion patterns. One of the biggest things I've seen in many years of working with both performers and engineers / computer scientists is that typically engineers or computer scientists, we will argmax things. We will try to find the most maximal, optimal solution, right? What happens when I bring performers into my lab is they understand there's a space of possibility. So typically if I ask them to show me a sample 3 times, they will vary. They will be like, well, maybe I could try it like this, maybe I could try it like that. And so there's an exploration process before you finalize what you do. Next, pay attention to the audience. Look at how many faces with those salience detecting brains are in this audience right now, right? That's super helpful feedback for what you're developing. Plan for multiple actors. One of the things that I love about theater and dance, there is duo comedy, but I did stand up because I had a single robot, but initially, but is that you can plan for multiple actors on stage, right? And then you can plan for them to interact with each other. So that might mean I'm not just caring about audience estimation, but I might want an easy modality for the co-performer to be able to intervene with my system. For example, we did this Chairbot performance at the last Robot Film Festival in 2019, and the dancer that developed stuff did a ballroom thing through kind of a FSR, the force sensitive resistor pressure sensors that were on the chair. So we have chairs in most conferences, but so we kind of designed the motion control. It was a chair from IKEA on top of a Nito bot vac. So it cost maybe $300 to build, and we augmented with these sensors so that it could be moved around because there was too much resistance in the robot. Otherwise, you couldn't just shove it like a normal chair. Okay, where are we? A plan for multiple actors. Next, use gaze to cue attention. One of my most cited papers is about expressive motion for mobile robots in X, Y, and theta. Okay, so X, Y, this is your position. You could do Z if you're doing a flying robot or if you are a dancer that wants to explore levels. But it's your XYZ position on the floor. So that trace over time, along with its derivatives, it tells you a lot about the emotion capacity. Whereas the theta tells people a lot about attention. Hello, I'm so glad you could join my talk. I really appreciate having you here. Yeah. So we use both our body pose and our head orientation to cue attention. Dyadic gesture as well. Right? And then finally, and this is the one that I think my personal research has benefited from the most in the last couple of years with grad students, is that learn through rehearsal. Don't be one and done, right? It's not just about the performance. For real actors and performers know that you have this 8-week cycle and you should practice multiple times or have a dress rehearsal the day before, right? So you can do a good job when it really matters. And that is, again, a process of refinement. And loop with your audience, your co-performers, etc. All right, so let me give you a few more details and some papers you can follow, okay? So my PhD thesis was expressive motion for low degree of freedom robots, all right? Where did that come from? They gave me permission to attend an acting class at Carnegie Mellon about acting movement. At Carnegie Mellon, we have a very excellent computer science program, but it is actually harder as an undergrad to get into our acting program. They only admit 12 students a year. So it was kind of a big deal that a second-year grad student was allowed to participate in this, whatever it is, 12-week course, right? And they taught me about the Laban effort system. But Laban apparently had been inspired by Charles Darwin, 1872 book, The Expression of Emotion in Man and Animals. How do organisms use and express emotions, and why? Right? So that's pretty interesting. So, am I trying to tell you it's time for dinner? Come back home, sweetie, right? Do I want to eat you? And you might need a little bit more context, right? There could be multiple actors, there could be spatial relationships, there could be sequence. Right, non-groupals. the robot might actually have to do something. There are often also props in performance, right? And if we are talking about performance in the theater of the real world, right, the robot should be doing something. On my way walking in, I saw a robot arm with a marker and a mock-up of a leg, right? Because they wanted to, a big issue is you put the patient under and you forget which side of which thing to take out. We're like, oops, wrong liver. Sorry, I don't know that much about humans, but well, something that we have too. Oops, I should have done the other one, right? But you can also sort of passively observe things. So here, let me just show you. So here's another breakdown of this type of communications, right? So how do different agents communicate state and intention to each other? Sometimes they actively communicate it, like you have the little waggle butt bees that kind of can give a vector to a really yummy flower so that other bees can also go get there. You could also just watch, okay, they think they're going over there, they must be dropping over that box. You have passive observation, like even if when I'm walking, I don't have to make eye contact with everyone to see that there's more people filtering through. And when I started doing a static dance, some people told me that actually soft gaze is kind of nice, right? So it's like, that's where I don't know if you're blurring your eyes but you're not actively trying to engage each individual if you're trying to be in the zone, right? So there can be ways that being a little bit more passive can actually facilitate certain types of expression. And then, of course, there's active expression, active observation. Number 2, motion styles communication. There's an entire workshop also about this tomorrow. So come back, please. But so performing arts teach movement as function, sure, but it's also an indicator of motive, relationship, and intent. And so a lot of my work during my PhD looked at mobile robots and how varying their character is helpful. So first I did I built a motion tracking using kind of these Reactivision labels of kind of mock-ups of both the interaction partner and the robot. And I had people act out scenes, like for example, going through a hallway by someone that doesn't like robots, which is something that came up for us with our Cobot project at Carnegie Mellon. And so we actually had programmed into our nav system to go slower around those people's offices. Any guesses why we wanted to go slower? So they don't see them?
Cool.
So they could see them. So we're trying to get them to like the robots. That's a good hypothesis. Anybody else?
I was thinking you just wanted to, see what would happen if you walked a robot by someone who was pretty scared. Since increase the chances that fear thing.
Yeah. Huh. All right. Yeah. That's good. Kind of like test the situation, see what might actually pivot or be helpful, or even what might convert them into a better interaction partner. Go ahead.
Why?
Bingo. Yeah. So I think all of these are important. And when I did the motion tracking table study, people did also do things like they went further away from the thing, or you could take a longer route and if it's a circular thing, and miss their office entirely. Like sometimes there's more than one path you can take. There are other people that have worked more in trying to figure out who would be a good person to ask for help, which is an interesting one. But the reason why we made it go slower is because it just so happened that the motors were super loud when it was going fast, and it was much quieter. So what does it mean for robots to be considerate and effectively adapt to their audience? And I would argue that office space was the audience of this hallway navigation robot. Another study I did taking candy from a robot, which was again at the beginning of my PhD, we would dress up these robots for Halloween, give out candy. My lab does that also at Oregon State, or has done that. But one thing that I hadn't planned for, what ended up happening is that the robots, as they were going through the hallways to deliver autonomously candy to many offices, I think they dispersed of 2.6 kilograms of candy across 3 robots and visited 200 something offices in like a day, over 3 hours. It was pretty exciting. Is that when the robot looked like it had somewhere to go, they wouldn't take the candy. But if the robot was like, boy, I had candy, they were twice as likely to take it. And then it was without any verbal cues, just with the motion. And that was not designed into the study. My study design had been to vary the motion patterns. Hello, is this your office? Would you like the candy? So sometimes the candy was close. Sometimes it was like, hey, would you like candy? So we were trying to be socially awkward versus normative just to test whether those pivots. And so that did make a moderate difference, but the much more interesting result, and the reason why you should put robots in the wild, is that sometimes you discover other things that you would never have even thought of. Like, I had no idea how many people would be like, oh, it's Halloween, look at the costume, it's carrying candy. Of course it wants me to take the candy. Go ahead.
Have you ever seen if those tendencies like stay the same if it's like a person not speaking but just like walking?
Yes.
With
Yeah, I bet we could do this test and all carry candy with different motion conditions outside, and I would bet that we could replicate this result. That's my intuition. Okay, so mobile road expression, detailing types of systems. Oh, I didn't put a tube up. Yay! Yeah, so we've applied this feature space of time, space, weight, which right now we're sort of thinking about as force and flow, but especially time, weight, force, to a couple different mobile robot platforms. The Cobot was where I started. I had a 5-year project, also in collaboration with Wendy Ju and David Sirkin, about developing rearranging robot furniture systems. So sometimes when you're working on a new application space, your question is not like, again, the argmax initially. It's like, well, what is the space of possibility here? Okay? And so we actually use a lot of improv methods to figure out what could be a good motion design space for that. But it's easier to explore a space when you have a vocabulary, right? And so to be able to be like, okay, well, that was a little faster, that was a little slower, I mean, that is a type of vocabulary. But if we go back to that salience modeling and organism expression, like sometimes there is a latent space that can be known, or there is also a vocabulary that you can directly communicate about. Like a director might tell you, okay, that was really good, but can you try it with like a little bit more force? My is really going good. And then we also looked at factory transport robots. It ended up being kind of hard to integrate the motion feature space that I had into their motion stack because it's a navigation robot. So we ended up redesigning their light communication systems. Again, we didn't we went in there being like, they were like, please work with us. We are curious about your motion features. So, okay, like this very small little bucket of money for a year or two. And then got to do some research with them. Again, sent 2 students out to their facilities in Kitchener, Canada, and talked to people, visited factories that use them. And what we uncovered as a gap that we thought we could contribute to in the immediate moment was in their light communication mechanism. So my student Alexander Bakula has a paper about redesigning their light communication system, and it went from like a 3-state communication model to like 5, right? So for example, the robot would never communicate it was done. So you couldn't tell whether it was broken or it had finished its job. So audience engagement. Great performers can adapt to what's happening and can use real-time feedback to adjust or at least reflect later on what happened, right? So just like when you run controlled experiments, sometimes you can also reflect on the data later in aggregate. But you can, I gave a TED Talk in 2010 and wrote up a system that I developed with 2 other computer vision researchers to do audience and sound, audience detection through sound and computer vision. So here are 2 pictures that are not in any publication or presentation that I've given before. But this one thing about working with light is that light levels change quite a lot. So there's a long calibration phase. So again, remember that big diagram about technical feasibility and human salience? We had to learn quite a bit about how to get the computer vision set up realistically to get this thing to work in the space that we ended up demoing that robot. So that was a learning for me. I had been doing other types of perception through capacitive sensors, pyroelectrics, I look at heat and so on. I was electrical engineer as my major. So it was fun learning about computer vision, which I think is like the computer science version of sensors. But yeah. If you have multiple agents on stage, their relative spacing over time can tell a lot about relationship, okay? So here is one paper, she has several now, by Alexandra Bakula, called Exploring Community Gestures for Simple Multi-Robot Systems. And I think these images are also from a later work looking at different types of formations. For example, in the military, they have these things called F formations that help people have a vocabulary about how you should approach that space, right? If someone's giving you guidance, you need to know what to talk about. So we were curious, well, how would people react to different patterns of a multi-robot system crossing a space? And this one particular experiment that we ran on campus and at an event in Southern California. So we can have like a 2-location, like, is this a cultural norm in Oregon, or is this a broader theme that we're... But one funny thing, and humans play a lot with phones now. They do that more than when I started 22 years ago. So a funny thing about this type of V formation, I feel like I picked on you a lot. Let's see. Is that people on their phone like get trapped by the robots. So they eventually look up and they're like inside the formation. Whereas this one, which is maybe the geese have something going for them. So yeah, thinking about synchronized motions and establishing group. Alexandra also had a paper where she showed that depending on the relative motions, you could even establish subgroups, like among multiple robots, like multiple people in breakout sessions in different parts of the room. So I think, again, that some of these things have relevance even to the dull and dangerous and dirty domains, like we've been starting to play with for underwater robotics. Like, how can multi-party cooperate? Again, with this rise of this agent-based programming systems, I think a lot of lessons from social robotics are going to cross-apply onto systems that can kind of communicate and reason with each other. So here is one definition of a human-robot model. For example, if there is a remote human that is helping an underwater robot do inspection and maintenance on this underwater infrastructure, that might have biofouling, which means stuff growing on it. So there would be the person, right, over there. There could be the robot. It's a really great swimmy robot, obviously. Often they look a little bit more like torpedoes or you know, actually they're almost like drones, but like with thrusters. Like that can go up and down. And then you have the task that you're trying to do. For example, perhaps that robot is doing that inspection and maintenance, right? But all of these things, to get it to work, you also have to think about the environment, right? The stage. So there could be water going through. So if I were doing that juggling robot, perhaps we want to do an underwater robot juggler. Like, well, we would have to deal with very different dynamics and physics from the environment. All right. Next, back to theta. So gaze, or theta, your orientation, cues attention. So I was talking to a researcher recently, and he was like, well, why should that be true for robots? You could have 360 cameras. But even if our sensors don't have facing, often our manipulators or aspects of our robot do. And people do tend to attribute face. And if you don't, even if you don't have that, when you start moving, the direction of motion is also kind of a good proxy for facing, right? Because that's your front. So that's something that I've seen quite a lot. But research on head motion expressivity and proxemics, so study of social distances, shows that even subtle movements can help match speech to spatial attention. There's a movement coding scheme developed by KTH in Sweden that explicitly establishes the relationship, the use of gaze for conversation management and turn taking. So that's another one. Remember the original definition of entertainment is keeping someone in conversation. What are we both looking at, right? Like, could we also think about not just pressing a button on the operator interface, but incorporating something nonverbals, like maybe the camera back to us, like they are doing for all the data collection from our phones of our faces. Do you know they're analyzing this, right? So what if the robot's like, do you think I should do this? And it could see the operator. What if it had the window to the human? And it's like, oh, you don't seem very sure about this. I'm going to give you a second to think about this. If it's helpful, why not, right? Finally, I don't think this list would be complete if we didn't also incorporate the possibility of either controlled scientific study or machine learning, which are two different approaches to do the same thing, which is make better robots, right? Through understanding of data. So we have the learning that we might be able to do during a live operation. One of the inspirations for my initial robot comedy audience detection system was that I had worked with a different acting professor than the dramaturgy guy at the beginning, also at Carnegie Mellon. And I had asked him about how performers what do they do in audiences? And he told me that there had been these traveling like gypsy troops, like that would sometimes, they would go to so many different cities in Europe, and so they would sometimes do a test set, like 3 initial almost like jokes to feel out the audience, and then they would decide the next 40 minutes because they had different material they could do based on their read of that audience. I was like, whoa, that is cool, and it's really efficient. But you can also do kind of after-action review, or I like having people body storm things before they even program them.
Is it body storm?
Body storm, yeah.
I don't know what that.
It's a brainstorming with your body. One of the things that I think is neat about this organism metaphor and even the expression of emotions in animal and man is that we, or in humans, for the modern interpretation of the title, body storming, is that we have intelligence already in our body, right? So I might not know what would be a good move, right? But if I try it, like that's like, so I was like, I learned from a ballet dancer in the past year. If you spin like this, starting with my feet, it's less stable than if you have a back foot. See how I can put my weight backwards? Like the mechanical engineers in the room should understand kinematics. But I can now, and I have this wind up, and so by just having a different pose, I know a much more stable landing, right? And I also have a stronger push. So the biomechanics of us could be helpful, but I also think there's a somatic part that is our emotional experience, right? One of the reasons why having a director in the audience and an actors on stage playing a scene and then having the director but you can use your body experience to feel how it went. Like maybe Naomi at the comedy festival last night had a body sense of what was happening, right? And if you do those performances many times, you can hone that, and you can refine sub-jokes to make things better. So trust your body, notice your own senses, because that salience filter is also in you. Okay, so here is a photo show of some past projects in relative time order. Robots are high maintenance performers. This is some prep. I spent maybe 6 years doing a lot of talks after my TED Talk. And I kind of used robot coming as an excuse to teach the world about social robotics in general and what was happening in the world. And so one thing is people over-trust robots and think they're better than humans. But if you actually look at the best robot dancers in the world, I might give position 1 and 2 to humans. Right now, I'm an assistant professor at Oregon State. I started doing robot comedy in 2010 after working for Aldebaran in robotics in Paris. I did not want to give my robot back. So I bought a $6,000 robot instead of a car going into grad school. And that meant my PhD advisor couldn't tell me what to do. I actually don't even have him cited on my robot comedy paper. I submitted that solo because I thought it was a cool idea. My main research was about the expressive motion and audience modeling stuff later. But yeah. So I have gotten to present things a lot of places. Oh yeah, I developed a sensate skin for a robot teddy bear at the MIT Media Lab. I forgot to mention that, but we also got to exhibit that at Ars Electronica, I think in 2008, a very long time ago. I switched from MIT to CMU in part because their robotics program is the oldest in the United States, and it's just really good. They managed to do autonomous driving from one coast to the other of America in 1991. And so their computer vision people are heavily integrated into their robotics people because of that background, and they also, again, have this really great drama department. So I'm going to skip this for now, but, okay, here. So this is even before some of this stuff. So this is I did worked in capacitive sensing for maybe 5 years. A sensate skin robot teddy bear, the panels on the now. And then this was also a collaboration with a group at MIT and Pidiamagine in Italy, where we built this obelisk that we called the Cloud. It's kind of like a low resolution display of lights. And then my contribution also had capacitive sensing, so that when you touched it, that's my favorite spot, it would respond. So I helped make the animations, but okay, let's see. Anyway, but so we had different modalities for people to interact with this object. So I started out more in art than in theater. I think I just thought about interactivity and human experience. So that I think this is kind of helpful to know as a background. And so here's a picture of that Sensate bear. So it was, I hand carved it out of foam. It fit under a teddy bear skin, and it had a bunch of electronics inside that you could use. At that time, before that, we had also gotten the chance to develop a robot flower garden called Cyberflora, which was really cool, and it was led by Cynthia, so it took a lot of that cognitive architecture of attention, and so when people would walk into the gallery space, the robots would track them, just a warm object. So we got to build different flowers there. After MIT, I moved to Los Angeles, and I worked for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It was really weird having a 9-to-5 job because I had never had nights and weekends before. So we got to do some events. I threw my first event called Little Green. It was a sustainability cocktail party. I didn't know anything about sustainability, but I kept meeting people that did, so I invited them to come give talks and then learn how to make cocktails. It was great. Because I had stolen the robot from the job, it's like being bonded to a puppy that you don't want to give back. I was able to bring it to events like this food camp, I think, was the 2010, and it was fun seeing the robots also interact with different types of humans. Just before I started my PhD, but after I had stolen the robot, I actually was just going to borrow it for 3 weeks, so I was still in my borrowing phase. I hadn't bought it yet. I developed my very first robot comedy performance. It was called Postcards from New York. I deployed it in Washington Square Park. It basically had these postcards that showed images of neighborhoods that people in New York City would know. And the fiducial would cue a particular act. And then me as the kind of tech manager, stage manager, I'd just change its prop real quick. Because that adds to the, I think this was Williamsburg. So they were like, yeah, you get it. And so then next, very closely, after 3 weeks later, I started at Carnegie Mellon. The US does a census every so often. It's not every year, so I just aligned that year. I had a friend spoof the census form because at Carnegie Mellon at the time, we didn't come in with an advisor. And you have to choose an advisor once you get there. There's a lot of faculty. And so I said, how could I choose an advisor without knowing what robots they have? So we did a robot census, and then we ended up sharing it. And so it went kind of international. But on campus, I discovered that there were over 500 robots. One of the largest contingencies of robots at Carnegie Mellon was actually in the theater department, because of their light systems, which are all programmable. Who knew? I ended up choosing Reed Simmons, in case you're curious. But yeah. So here is some more dev photos of now stuff. This was just one of my favorite robot comedy experiences. We got to perform at the Amsterdam Comedy Festival at one point, and they did that pickup sign, but for both me and for my robot. And I was like, oh, thank you. If you can give a TED Talk, it's helpful because people want to hear about your work. But so here is, I would always tell people, look, it's a stand-up comic. See? It's standing.
This here is my programmer, Heather Knight. Heather designs my presentations with the goal of driving innovation in social robotics, which is the integration of robot helpers into everyday life.
I've been doing robotics for about 12 years. I started working on robots when I was a college freshman, it sort of along the way I fell in love with the idea that we could collaborate between the arts and robotics, and I had a single now robot, and I was like, well, hey, a comedy routine on stage, that seems like a single performer on stage, and that's how I started 4 years ago.
A doctor says to his patient, I have bad news and worse news. The bad news is that you only have 24 hours to live. That's terrible, said the patient. How can the news possibly be worse? I've been trying to contact you since yesterday.
So now you get to see it in action.
Cool things about robotics in general. Well, all right, this. All right. Huge admirer also of other people's work. Per Amy's advice, I tried not to do a giant retrospective of others. There's a limited time. But I really did
love getting to see Hiroshi Ishiguro's robot theater project in person at the Japanese Society in New York one time, and we got to do a panel afterwards talking about this.
This actuator's body, and then by combining the the other actuator for opening a mouth, right, and and the lifting this the cheek, right, so in a facial expression. In this there's minimal.
At Oregon State University, Naomi Fitter founded also a Singularity series that she participated in, I think, the first 2 editions, right? So that was a really great opportunity for Alexandra to get started in her multi-robot expression project. And so she custom developed these robot jellyfish. And we have a publication, I believe this was at the last ICRA, at a prior ICRA Art and Robotics program called Excluded by the Jellyfish, exploring how social agents could work together to include or exclude you. So it was fun to have dancers make choreography around that concept, and it did inspire some features that she did include in her final software architecture. We also developed a multi-robot comedy system with a different Janani Swaminathan, which we deployed at farmers markets and at some festivals, and there were actually 2 of those Blossom robots developed at Cornell by Guy Hoffman's lab, and they would do episodic comedy with variants, and so they ran their own user study. So they were like a little booth at this festival, and people coming by would come and sit at shows, and there was a sequence of 6 jokes that was inspired by radio show format. And you're like, if you're just tuning in, I'm here with a Baby Blue and Fun Guy. It was a green robot, so we called it Fun Guy. He was like a fun guy that was also fun. Anyway, yeah. And I think this is towards the end of the photo, but so in the 6 years I've been at Oregon State, I've also gotten to share some of our work about expressive motion, and we've done many, many more robot Halloween deployments. Here's the most recent one with our robot Pepper, and I wasn't even involved anymore. My students are very well trained now because we do a lot of live deployments, and so they dressed it up with a Harry Potter outfit and made this whole interactive storytelling. And my student Luke actually was sitting off on the side because he likes to optimize things also to what's happening. So if there's like a person that's like trying to kick the robot, sometimes he'll add in a statement. So it's kind of like the human in the loop. Oh yeah, and this was a totally new format for me. One time we even got to do kind of like a halftime show at a women's basketball game at Oregon State. We had 45 seconds. Guys, like we literally had to run out. I don't know if you've been at a sporting event with like a game or something. You had to put the robot down. It did its thing, and then they're like, "Okay, time's running out," and you're like, "Pick up the thing, run back out." So that was a really interesting format to experience. All right, wrapping up. I think art can be thought of as adjacent play to technology development. When I was a baby undergrad studying electrical engineering, late at night, probably supposed to be soldering, I took this picture of this teeny little blue LED and the clippers, because it just looked like it was this mean thing that was attacking this little baby, and I don't know if this one's coming in to help or what, but you can make stories and scenes out of anything, right? I think that storytelling is a wonderful way of thinking about character development, because people, because of our brains, are always going to attribute some kind of character to the robot. So you might as well make it the one you want, or as much you can with that loop of possibility. I hope in the future there'll be more plays with robots, because I think we'll learn a lot about expression. It's great when you're making art to mash up stuff in unusual ways. I learned from one of my lab colleagues at MIT, Jeff Lieberman, who left the PhD program early to go be a professional artist, that sometimes 2 twists makes for great art. Like one twist doesn't necessarily captivate. So one time he made this, it was a light bulb that could turn on, that was hovering in space. Essentially he was a physicist, so it was both passing power and also doing the hovering. So those are two separate physical mechanisms. So that was the first example. So maybe that'll be useful for you. If you think about, this will be a crazy amount of stuff, maybe think about one more weird thing, and then you'll be like, really up there. I've also had a chance to teach artists to use electronics at Machine Project in Los Angeles a long time ago. And it was really interesting to see what they would do with like a little LED and a motor. I think one of the inspo projects for that class was a curtain on a store window. Like, let's say you didn't have enough cloth, but you had a lot of robotics, okay? So as a person was walking by, like the curtain could just track you. So you could never see in the window, even if it was a giant, big, open window. So that was one of the ideas that came out of my class. I thought it was pretty great. I have never told the robotics community this before, but I took acting for film classes. I have a certificate from the New York Film Academy. I did like a 6-week program in Paris after working for Aldebaran. It was great. So I studied movement. I studied stagecraft. Movement was my favorite. And I think that bringing robots in front of people, whether it's throwing events, whether it's organizing things with your friends, is a wonderful way to incorporate the general world into the development process of robots. Here's a shot from our Robot Film Festival and a part of our OK Go Rube Goldberg machine. This was a Lego table. So past things. I really loved our venue for the first 2 editions of the Robot Film Festival. It almost looked like a Stanley Kubrick movie. It was at this space called Three-Legged Dog. And people would bring robots on this red carpet and dress them up, and we would host the films, and then we would also have a couple live performances. So you can also do events that have more than one media if you want to do something like that in the future. All right, 2 more slides. If you can't remember already, now you've seen a lot more photos, let's go through some of these lessons again. Remember to prioritize nonverbals, right? Play. Don't just be one and done. And motion patterns and really many other modalities of robot behavior can be explored before the final version. Pay attention to the audience. In this case, at our postcards from New York, we had no idea that someone was going to come, walk up and start drawing a robot, right? Or when we did our expressive motion experiment with the robot Halloween with the Koba, I had no idea that our main result was going to be by people in the hallway, right? Instead of the people at the offices that we designed the experiment about. Plan for multiple agents, whether that's a human-robot system or multiple robots. Think about, it's not enough to just put 3 robots in a space. Plan for their spatial relationships, for the temporal relationships. Gaze/orientation is really helpful for cueing mutual attention and sometimes other forms of intent, like, okay, yeah, I want to talk, right? Managing conversation. And please try, fail, and try again. And play. Thank you very much for your time. I was trying to be a robot. I hope you can also try lots of improv, entertainment methods, and social robotics. It is also the title of an IRB that we've been using for 6 years in my lab. So if anyone wants to talk about doing this kind of stuff in your own research, happy to share that with you. Thank you.
On to questions for it. We have time for a couple of questions. You might have a question. Yeah?
I think Wiki presentation was all in research. How about in your teaching? You just integrate with business.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a lot of design classes. So I taught a class with Jonathan Hurst, who is one of the founders of Agility Robotics. But so we would give people a challenge. For example, one year we did cornhole. Can make a robot that can play cornhole. And I think that starts again with, well, how could I do that? So what is salient to cornhole, right? That's a game from people, right? There's this little thing that you have to estimate and hit, right? And there are different ways to get sandbags in that. You could slide into it, you could go beyond it and go down because it's at an angle. So I still think you kind of go to that, what is technically possible and what is salient to this problem? So in that respect, starting there, and then if it's an interaction scenario, maybe even body storming it, like try it out with another person. Be like, Amy, if you were a chair, okay, and I was trying to clean my kitchen, like, how should we do that? Oh, that's so considerate. The chair moved out of the way when I was cleaning. Thank you. I really like this chair, right? So that would be an example. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I am curious, since you've done so much with these stand-up Canadian robots, if you apply the Aban dampen efforts or some other research to the point.
Brilliant question. If you want to collaborate, I've always wanted to do that. I really have this intuition that Laban features would be great for that because they're encoded in our organizable, like this is like how we work things. So things like time, like are we startled or do we feel like we have sort of sudden, like I don't want to get eaten. Like our body, it pops. And so a feature that we put into that, this is abruptness. Like it wasn't just faster. Like the startle was really helpful. So I think that we could do a feature like that with a voice. And I also think it would be really helpful for a person commanding working robots. For the robots to be able to parse, oh, she really cares. Or, oh, I can do this at some point. Like this was a task for lady, right? So yeah, I think that would be really helpful.
Is it okay if I ask 2 questions?
Yes.
Okay. First question. I'm trying to make a robot that can play a game with a person as part of some of my research.
Okay.
I guess in a way that is a
games are a form of entertainment.
So would you say that it would be would you lose some utility if you had the robot emote as a person would, as say like if a failure were to happen, do you think it'd be useful for the robot to say like express some type of frustration to I guess make it seem more relatable to the
Absolutely. Leila Takayama did this amazing collaboration with an animator while she was at Willow Garage, where they basically were trying to get the robot to open the door, but the perception system is not perfect. So like it would like think, and then it would finally do it and would like miss the handle completely. And then the person watching it would be like, what an idiot, and the robot would do nothing. And so, but they worked with the animators so that it would be disappointed when it fails. And it would be excited. And so that annotation of its own experience, like I was grateful for the chair, right? That's an authentic emotion that I had in that moment. I was like, thank you. Like it's annoying to have to, like get around this. So yeah, I think that incorporating emotion can be good. It can also be bad, right? So apparently the early voice navigation system for cars, they were really chipper. And so if you just missed a turn, it would be really happy about it, right? And people would be like, this is annoying. And they would make more mistakes because it was incongruent, right? So the salience filter failed, right? They had the opposite, right? So, but when they made it neutral or when they made it coherent with the human emotional experience, like empathy, like, so now it's more neutral. I don't think it goes negative with us, but you could imagine a system like that if you were having a hard day and you wanted to talk to the robot about your problems, you're like, oh, that sucks, right? That would be the socially successful response. So in addition to body storming, another really common technique is to be like, well, what would a human do in this situation? And sometimes that can give you a good prior to start your process.
And my second question was, earlier on in the presentation, I remember you had a slide where you put all the organizations that you had worked with over the years. I'm assuming that involved a lot of redirecting your focus and like following what you might want to do, which might not match what you're currently doing. Correct? Is that a good assessment?
I can imagine it involved a lot of random walking through lives and seeing what happens.
Maybe you could talk to me about that experience, about like going from place to place.
Yeah. So I mean, I used to take every third year off. I know this is so kind of a privileged thing to say, but so I took a year off between my sophomore and junior year. I took a year off between my undergrad and my master's program, and I kind of would explore in the middle, and that's where I did most of my company works in like those periods between academics. So I have mostly been an academic. I've only been like 4 years in industry plus some consulting, so maybe we could call it 5.
One more question?
Hey, protocol Professor A. I also have 2 questions. So
Yeah, so you can work with any form factor. My PhD is expressive motion for low degree and freedom robots, and so the feature space of Laban, and we've used tons of mobile robots, is broad. I think the things that happen when you have more limbs, or when you have not, and Amy can probably speak to this as well, or some of our performers from yesterday. There's a lot more possibilities for motion when you have like a 7-DOF arm. Would you want to start from what a human would do? Sometimes, maybe. I noticed a lot of shapes in the Rialto show last night. Like they were doing a lot of geometries, like between the robot and the performer. So like you could see that it was a triangle, or I was noticing that there was a lot of mirroring of certain shapes. So sometimes you could still play with also that point, like Dietic gesture is a pointing gesture, which is kind of like gaze except for your hand. But you can also make a hand look like a face by doing this, or like giving it a camera. So like in the Spock robot, you have the arm on top of it that is basically where the end effector is, the head. And when I was playing with it, I was like, I want to be able to talk back to it. Please, like, let me train a classifier, like, so that when it does like a this, I could be like, well, hi, and then it'd be like, okay, and then it'd be like. And then it would be like, it could do some mirroring. So I think if you model the end effector as the XY, like as the center thing, like that's a good starting point. My student Janani hand-coded like a bunch of stand-up comedy videos in the Conan O'Brien show before we programmed that little Blossom robot, because we wanted to see how real comedians use their head gesture. And she actually had to add a category to the Newman voting scheme, which was not moving, which we called stare. Because one of the biggest things that a comedian does after a punchline is they tell the audience, now you can laugh. Right? So that leaving that space and also using that gaze cue to be like, your turn. Like, and if you don't annotate the timing correctly, then sometimes they miss the punchline. So that's I think it's really helpful to look at robotics within a particular task, because otherwise social behavior is too big. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's thank our speaker one more time. Speaker. We are going to start our awards ceremony in like 3-ish minutes.
There, right?
Here.
Let's do award ceremony.
For the special session that was on...